Let's say that checkout system number 4 stops sending data. Your monitoring dashboard shows heartbeats and nothing else. So, what went wrong? Is the register offline? Did someone spill Coke on the keyboard? Is it a hurricane? Or is it just nighttime and you got the time zone wrong? By the time the data's reached your warehouse, in the cloud or on-prem, you've probably lost the context. For example, things like what version of the software was running, maybe what time zone, what else was happening on that machine at that time. A lot of that could be missing. This is the problem that David Aronchick kept hearing from customers, not just at retail stores, but everywhere. Data growing at the edge, regulations saying that you can't move it across borders, the speed of light not getting any faster, and every time you move data, you seem to lose some context. David led Kubernetes product at Google, launching Google Kubernetes engine. Then he co-founded Kubeflow to bring ML pipelines to production. Each time, he was solving the same fundamental problem. How do you make distributed systems actually work? Now with Expanso, he's flipping the equation. Instead of moving your data to the compute, what if you moved compute to the data? Run your pipelines, your transformations, your metadata enrichment right where the data lives before it ever even leaves. This is a conversation about what changes when you stop asking, how do I get this data to the cloud or on my machine, and start asking, how do I process it before it loses that context?
So thank you, David, for joining.
My pleasure.
So first, I want to just learn a bit more about your journey. How did you get to the point where you are now to creating Expanso?
You know, I started the most recent arc of my career at Google in about 2015. They brought me in to lead Kubernetes, which was the distributed compute platform that they were open sourcing, and not lead the entire project, just on the PM side, from the idea that we would have a hosted service, but also a lead representation of the internal project as well. And at the time that we got that going, there was a general idea that there was a whole ball of compute out there, and people wanted to think about it as though it was, as one giant blob, instead of what they were having to do, which was deal with everything as individual machines and figure out how to deploy stuff and figure out how to manage it and all that kind of stuff. So it was really annoying for them. Kubernetes comes along, and there were lots of other people doing this, but it happened to be very successful at helping people think about this in a really unified way, which was new. So I led that for a bunch of years, and at the time, as I started to say, like, oh, I've been doing this a while, let me see what else is next, I started to think about machine learning. And this is in 2018, before a lot of machine learning really got going. I started a project called Kubeflow. I co-founded it with a couple of people, and it, has quickly become one of the most widely deployed frameworks for rolling out machine learning pipelines and so on and so forth. Sometimes you get to a point in your career where you look back and you're like, wow, actually, I've been doing the same thing for all these years, and finally you come to realize that. And after doing a little bit of interim at Azure and then at Protocol Labs, I realized that I was addressing, what I really was fundamentally addressing was the other half of the problem that existed around that ball of compute problem that we started, right? So like I have 1,000 machines, each machine has a CPU in it. What do I do with them? That's what Kubernetes and to some degree Kubeflow was designed to solve. The other half of it is I have 1,000 machines. Each one has access to different data. How do I think about that as kind of a unified thing where I can move the data and run jobs next to it and so on and so forth in a reliable way? So that's what they were working on. I mean, that's what we took on with Expanso. It's the idea that you can have intelligent data pipelines that run where you are collecting the data that ultimately you will feed into your data warehouse or into your backend or whatever, or into your machine learning pipeline, whatever it might be. But think about, you don't have to go and log into every machine. You don't have to log into your edge device or your HVAC or your whatever. You can just say, hey, system, I got all this stuff out there. Help me execute jobs against that. And that's what we help with.
Okay, I want to get more to Expanso, but that history that you mentioned is so interesting. So I want to ask a couple questions about that. First is, what are some things you learned? You said you were doing product at Google on Kubernetes, which we know is a huge project. I'm sure you're doing a lot of important things there. What did you learn from that Kubernetes experience?
First and foremost, I would say, I'd always been an open source guy. I'm a huge fan of open source, but operating at a scale of that size with that many communities and really starting from the ground up, building communities, building working groups, building the CNCF, the Cloud Native Compute Foundation, and doing it in such a way that you're walking the fine line between, hey, this is the way we think it should go, and still having it be community driven is really hard. I mean, it's something I spent a lot of time really trying to get right. How do you allow people, an individual person, which has, 100,000th time and energy and dollars and so on that Google does, how do you allow both of those people, if they have the right passion, to participate? So that was something really, really big that we were doing.
And how did you approach that problem? What were some strategies that you used or things that you found that were helpful to address that?
The biggest thing by a mile is show people the way, the clean, well-lit path to contributing, to starting to work on things. If it feels like your project is making decisions in a whole, back room or, hallway or whatever, then people are going to be frustrated. They're not going to see how stuff is happening. They're going to feel like excluded and things like that. If you say, hey, you know what? I don't care if you're sitting right next to the dev who's working on that feature, or you're, 6,000 kilometers away, you should be having this discussion in a place where all the interested parties can listen in and participate. And so that was a really big thing. And so what that meant is setting up those systems, setting up working groups, setting up regular meetings, having discussions take place in GitHub issues and things like that. Really enforcing that in the team was super important.
And can you tell me more about this transition to Kubeflow? I mean, Kubeflow is such an important project. I had Jack Bottom on my podcast before as well. He's very
I love it.
Kubeflow. Yeah, he's great. Something I've worked on a lot is Kserve, and that came from Kubeflow. So it's really such a special project. Can you tell me about that transition? You said that you started to focus on ML, but how did that actually play out?
Yeah, for sure. First, thank you very much. Again, the community doesn't thrive without people caring and contributing. And I would argue, I don't think that we came from Kubeflow. Kubeflow initially at the start was really an amorphous blob. And we're like, we have this philosophy on where we're going to go with it. But hey, everyone, if you have your project and you want to give it a space, come join. We'll make it all part of this thing. When Kubeflow launched, it was just a Jupyter notebook hosted in a container, a TensorFlow, a trainer, and I think it was TF-Serve at the time. So a TensorFlow serving engine. That was it. There was no pipeline, no anything like that. So the way it started was, I had spent this time, 3 years working on Kubernetes, and I really loved it. And I just kept hearing from customers over and over and over again, we would love to do more with our Kubernetes deployments. What do you recommend? And I kept looking around, and a lot of people were like, oh, let's run a database or let's run a this, which Kubernetes is great at, right? But it is it's not that interesting. I was like, what is interesting out there? What is going to be the center of gravity around a lot of stuff? And what is hard to wire together, right? Because that is one of the things that Kubernetes was exceptionally good at. It still is. It's, hey, I'm going to have all these microservices, and without really thinking about it, here's how we're going to wire them together, make it easy to deploy, make it easy to run, et cetera, et cetera. And that's really what Kubeflow was initially. It was just a very reliable, DevOps-friendly, GitOps-friendly way to build an entire set of machine learning services. And at the time, I was like, okay, we're going to figure out how to make this happen. There were a couple of people internally to Google, Vish Kanan, who was working on Kubernetes at the time on the GPUs, and most core was Jeremy Louis, the core engineer, who was my two in the box engineering manager. All three of us co-founded this, and we stole basically what they had already worked on in large part, right? I mean, it's all open source, so steal is a little bit strong, but Jeremy had already worked on a TensorFlow CRD at the time. Vish had already done a bunch of GPU optimization for Kubernetes. And then we went out and grabbed an open source, if I remember this right, it's been a little bit, but if I remember it right, we just grabbed an open source container that allowed you to spin up a Jupyter notebook, and we connected it together. And so this was just a trivial way to get going as the core. And then we started iterating on that. Very quickly thereafter, again, it's, I would just happen to have been there at the start. We had all these external people from Bloomberg, from a company called Kai Cloud out of China. There were all these people who were like, oh yeah, we really need this. We started, And on day one, the first week, we had 1,000 GitHub stars in 2017. End of 2017, beginning of 2018 was a large number. We're like, oh my God, there's something here. So that went kind of nuts. But most of all, like, it showed people the path to go forward. And so a lot of people, for example, at Google who were working on cloud ML and cloud AI, they already had some ideas for workflow engines that were ML specific. And they're like, okay, we're going to bring this over and we're going to, help you adopt Argo for on-prem pipelines and things like that. And so, it remained, this big amorphous blob for a while. It kept picking up things. And then people, in particular disciplines, workflow and GPU and serve, all took different angles at it and began to say, okay, now we need a working group around this. And now we need a working group around this. And then really what unlocked it was AWS had like their own, it wasn't defined. They didn't fork it or anything like that. They just made it very easy to run on EKS. And Google, of course, replatformed a Vertex to be Kubeflow compatible. Like, again, the clouds came later and made it very easy to adopt it. But it was just because there was so much momentum there up front, which, again, I can't claim much of the credit for at all. Just a lot of people out there wanted it to happen.
But there's something very important there about talking to customers and figuring out the pain points and seeing repeated problems that you can have a solution for. How do you approach this whole process now?
Yeah, I would say this is kind of harder than ever, right? Back in the day, you would just try and find people with the problem. That's the key. Figure out what the problem you're trying to solve is and find people with that problem. And back then, you could just drop into someone's LinkedIn or, maybe notice their contributions on GitHub and say, oh, I'm going to reach out or something like that. Now, just everything is filled with absolute slop. And I think, identifying these people, chatting with them is harder than it's ever been. But that said, if you can find them, if you can listen to them, really listen, and don't focus on what you want to ship, but focus on what would make their life easier, they'll still find it and love it. That doesn't necessarily mean they'll pay for it. That's another matter, or adopt it. But if you could just sit there and listen, you're off to, a really positive place.
And, now that you have your own company, Expanso, how do you speak to customers in order to figure that out? What are some things that you do to make sure that you're asking the right questions and going to build the right features?
Yeah. I mean, again, I would argue maybe even harder than open source. At least in open source, I know everyone's like, oh, open source doesn't have any money, it doesn't have this. True. But at the same time, it's also like open source is non-commercial, or at least it says so on the box, right? Now, those same conversations, when I reach out to someone, they're like, oh, are you selling me something? Are you going to rip and replace this other thing or whatever? I'm like, no. I just want to have a conversation. This is to some degree sales 101, right? Listen. Get the language, the things that they care about, understand what is setting their hair on fire? What are the top 1, 2, 3, 10 things that they need immediately? And focus on that. And because no matter how great your solution is, I don't care if it's a back massager, if they don't have time to go and sit down for a back massage, if they're really only focusing on whatever, log processing or something like that, then you saying that you have whatever, the greatest ML deployment on earth, they're going to be like, oh, that does sound great, but it's not one of my top 3. So you've got to find the top 3 and really just the top 1. And if you're not there, say, hey, you know what? That's great. Come talk to me when you got it. You'll both be happier if you do that.
Now, walk me through how you found this pain point that Expanso fixes.
So what I kept hearing over and over again was, hey, we're doing these deployments of jobs, of not just machine learning jobs, just any job, data processing or alerting or whatever it might be. And we're doing this, cross zone, cross region, cross cloud, all the way to edge and IoT and on-prem. And I was really inspired actually by a guy in the Kubernetes community, Ian Chambers, who is the lead architect for Chick-fil-A. And he tells this insane story. I think it was in 2017 is when I first saw it. They have a full Kubernetes cluster for every store. I think they're running on Yes, it's a full Kubernetes cluster, but I think it's like self-contained. So it's like K3S or some equivalent. We had tried to kind of get at that problem in the early days of Kubernetes. We called it federated Kubernetes, or at the time we called it Ubernetes, like above. How can you have one Kubernetes controller control many of them, things like that? But what was clear is there was a place in the world for something that was able to operate separate from each other, but still with a declarative construct over the top. So you simply say, okay, I know about you three. When you connect to me, then I'm going to update whatever state you have. But as long as you're not there, keep running just as you are, right? Kubernetes doesn't like that, right? Kubernetes really wants to have direct connectivity back to the API server as much as possible. And if it's gone for more than 5 minutes, by default, it assumes you're dead. And says we're going to move on. So that's kind of the broad strokes of what we were experiencing. And then, I started thinking about that. What can we do around this kind of federated thing? And really wanted to expand it, right? Because I said, what was the root of this? And I said, there are 3 big things. One, data is growing everywhere outside of your central data warehouse, data cluster, whatever it might be. And people need a way to rationalize about that. 2, the speed of light isn't getting any faster. So no matter how much you want to move data or move it over pipes or anything like that, you're gated by the physics of it. And then 3rd, even neither of those were the case, regulations are growing. So moving data, leaving it from wherever it was generated to another city, state, country, even another silo in your company, right? It was in the trading floor and now it's in HR or whatever. Those often trigger regulations, because now you need someone looking at it, making sure it's redacted, making sure it's this. So with those 3 things in mind, I said, okay, well, somebody needs to build a solution that addresses these, allows you to leave data where it is, but be smarter about it and provide respect to regulation. And the 3 of those together was how we got going. Now, to be clear, at the time I was at Protocol Labs, who is the company behind IPFS and Filecoin. And so this was a very, very natural overlap, because they have petabytes of data on the system. And so there's simply no way that you will be able to move the data around and so on, right? You will have to execute compute over data in order to execute on that. And so that was really the fundamental of our business. And since then, we've honed it down to make it really, really easy to build and run pipelines and transformations, all the way up to full ML models on the edge. We do all the above.
That's amazing. How and when did you decide to make the jump to go all in?
This is my 4th startup. I truly never thought I would go back. I thought I was done. I always think it's funny. Sometimes you just have to kind of like question what you're doing and what you think you're going to do and not.
Why did you think you were done?
I had a great career up to that point. I still did. And I was working at a big companies and say what you will about big companies, but it does give you the ability to execute and leverage a lot of stuff very, very quickly. And that's not trivial, right? If I wanted to go and, spend $500,000 on a conference push or something like that, you can do it. It's within the capabilities. There are systems and whatever in place to go do it. And I'm not ambitious for the sake of being ambitious. I don't care about myself, but I do have lots of big ideas that I'd love to make better in the world. And that means that you have to, get a lot of resources behind them. So, and that's that one thing that startups have none of, no matter how great you are. Right? Even in the best possible case where you go out and raise $1 billion, right? You have no awareness. And even if you do have awareness, you haven't shipped anything. And even if you have something and have shipped it, you have no history, right? Oh, great. I'm glad you did that other thing. And I'm glad you raised $1 billion, but am I going to bet my business on you tomorrow? Probably not. Rarely you can, but most of the time you're done. And so all that together is just one of the biggest things. And I just thought I was a big company boy at that point. And so I was at Microsoft, and then Protocol Labs came along, and I really loved the idea of distributed storage. I still do. I think it's really, really powerful. And there will be something there that comes from Protocol Labs and others. But when I was at Protocol Labs, they were like, there's a real opportunity to turn this compute over data into an industry movement, into a open source momentum project on its own. We held a bunch of summits and, we had tons of people attending and things like that. So I was like, oh, let's go do this. And they're like, fantastic. Here's some cash, go raise money to support it. And then off you go. And that's what we did.
Wait, that's interesting. So the company you were at gave you cash to go start another company.
Protocol Labs was obviously very, very successful with IPFS and Filecoin, but they've always wanted to be somewhat of a capital allocator, like take the success they had in these other places and allocate capital to businesses and things that aligned with their goals. And that was very much what we did. So it was much more like we were a place to implement one element of the overall projects that they were working on and go from there.
What lesson do you think you took from each of the first 3 startups with you to this 4th one?
You heard a lot of it already. There's no substitute for the ground game. You don't act like a big company, no matter how much you want to, because there's already plenty of those. Act like the incredibly responsive startup you are. Show people the passion. People are attracted to that. Be nimble, like really respond to the things that you think are going to make a difference. But, at the same time, it's very, very, very easy to chase the hot thing. Not just like externally chase the hot thing. I would even say that chasing the external hot thing is not the worst thing in the world, right? Be thoughtful, make sure it aligns with what you want to do. But, you can be thoughtful. You can go chase these things. We did a OpenClaw announcement when that was on fire. Don't get me wrong, it wasn't made up, it was real, but it was OpenClaw related anyway, and that helped us get some attention. But going beyond that, internally, it's really, really easy to get caught on some big customers. And even now we're facing this, right? We have some really, really big customers. And when they want something, my first conversation with them is, well, do you though? Like, what are you trying to get out of here? Let's unpack this a little bit. And it turns out that this particular person doesn't have this authority. And so we're trying to work around it. And I was like, well, maybe there's another way to approach this. But it doesn't mean ignore them, just really try and get at what they're trying to get. The number one most precious resource you have as a startup founder is your time. And you never have enough of it, ever. So yeah.
You mentioned a few problems that your company solves and a few ways they solved it. What was the first feature you implemented in Expanso?
We're former Googlers and Amazonians and Microsofties, and we felt like there was just a much better way to do logs. That was it. Really. Not a replacement for any observability tool. You use Splunk, you use Datadog, you use Honeycomb, you use CloudTrail, whatever. Enjoy. Promise. Enjoy. We do not ask you to change one iota, but especially in this world, people are moving too much data into bronze tier. The data is often very badly shaped. The data often very, very quickly loses context. So, for example, the story I love to tell is, let's say you had a point of sale system. You had a store with, 5 point of sale systems in it. And all of a sudden, point of sale system number 4 stops giving any data. Well, why? Could it be that no one went to the register? Could it be that someone spilled Coke on the keyboard and, it's in the back room waiting to be cleaned? Could it be that there's a hurricane? Could it be that it's night? You got the time zones wrong and it's the middle of the night. You don't know anything because you don't have the context. And when we ship data naively into the cloud, one of the first things we lose is context, because all you see is this is a point of sale system. And, in the past, 1 hour, all I've gotten was heartbeats, nothing else. So, all of that together was what we really try and tackle first. Let you be thoughtful. Take, if you have a 17-step, ETL pipeline, and most of the folks I talk to are like, yeah, try adding a 0. But you have a 17-step ETL pipeline, right? And you say, well, those first 4 steps, like clean, enforce schema, add some lineage, whatever, let's move those much, much, much closer to the data. Because if we add those to the data, if we structure it and we enforce it, we can make everything downstream so much smarter. And that's what we really try to do is, in our agent, which is, super teeny, it's 150 megabytes. It can process, 400,000 signals per second. It really just flies and it's great. And you run it right next to your data. Doesn't have to be on the machine, could be nearby, but either way. But then on top of that, we enable you to, have reliability and have observability. I will never say anything ill against Vector or FluentBit or Logstash or anything. They're great. But right now, if you wanted to observe a Logstash pipeline, that means you have to go and write a whole bunch of observability all around it. If you wanted to upload that across whatever 15 different servers, you have to go figure out how to deploy that pipeline to all those places. And it doesn't do, I mean, it's very, very powerful, but it doesn't do much, right? All it's doing is picking up the logs from here and moving them over there. Wouldn't it be nice if with the same level of flexibility, you could go and solve that and, by the way, whatever, reduce your costs or improve your AI and your alerting and so on and so forth? Wouldn't that be nice? All of us internally who had previously been at these big companies working on logs and working on data movement were like, yeah, that would be awesome. And so that's what we built. That was certainly the first bit. But, last weekend I was demoing how to run full NL pipelines through our system. Same platform, same functionality, just that level of flexibility.
Okay, so talk to me about how an agent solves this. You're at step 4 and you have an agent that's near data and it's helping you get this context about maybe something went wrong. How exactly does your product fit in and help to solve that problem with that agent?
And to be clear, let me restate, or let me reassure, this is a real old school, Unix agent, right? Like daemon. Don't think like AI agent. I know you weren't saying that. I just want to make it clear for all your audience. Like this is just generic stuff. So when you think about it, let's take 4 steps to those early steps, right? Step 1, I'm going to read from this whatever file, right? You have a web server, it's writing to a file. The first thing I'm going to do is read it. The second thing I'm going to do is turn it into a data format that is appropriate. If you use Nginx or Apache, for example, it writes it like just a line, right? And it's like tab separated, which is not really what your database wants. It doesn't have any context, or, anything there. So the first thing you're going to want to do is usually turn it into something structured. And again, forgive me that this is basic. There are lots of ways to address it. I'm just trying to piece it all together for everyone. So the first thing you want to do is turn it from that single line into something like JSON, right? Which is well structured. And maybe you want to do some schema enforcement. You say, oh, you know what? If someone is trying to attack me and one of these lines is, I have no idea. Again, forgive me that this is so simple. More than 1024 bytes long. Well, that's no good, right? Nothing that I do intentionally will be that long. Therefore, that's an attack. I'm just going to exclude it. So you're doing that kind of enforcement there. So now you've done first, you've converted it. Now you've done some basic enforcement. Now you want to do schema enforcement. So you're like, hey, when I did this conversion, maybe something along the way put 2 single quotes next to each other, which would have escaped it as you converted it, right? So that broke the schema right there. And if I send that all the way through, now great. Now that means my pipeline's going to break later. So you do that enforcement right there. And then finally, you add some metadata about what you're moving. It is this machine in this location. Here's the time zone it's running in. Here's the this it's running in, whatever. And then you push it onto your backend. Now, this is really, really basic stuff. But what people do today is they don't do any of that, right? They take that raw log line and they push it into whatever, an S3 bucket or something. And then they're begin to process. And what do they do when it lands on the S3 bucket? They come up with some crazy naming format. So you know what the name of the server that it came from was with. And it pushes everything later. And that's pushing it later is not because you've already lost that context. What version of the operating system was this running on? What application? What was the version of Nginx that was running over there? I don't know any of that stuff. And I had to try and recreate it later or coordinate it between various systems. I have to go pull from my DevOps deployment and pull that in to see what was running at this time. If I could encapsulate that all together so every bit of data that comes through is appropriate, then great. Now I can do stuff. And we haven't even really gotten to the more advanced stuff, right? So we're doing some stuff with some solar panel folks. We have solar panels deployed all across Southwest Australia. These things are connected over, barely 3G. And they're collecting data on a per second basis. Every inverter attached to a solar panel is collecting data on a per second basis. But what they want is only 10-minute windows, right? Per inverter, 10 minutes windows are fine. Just say, here was the average for the last 10 minutes of this inverter. And if it's bad, then we'll deal with it then. But we can't push data on a per second basis. We have to push it on a 10-minute window because Otherwise, it'll completely overwhelm our bandwidth. And again, this is not just Southwest Australia. I talk to people on, manufacturing and factory floors connected over cable modems. I talk to, startups, full companies out there, like big cloud native companies. So the bandwidth, the default bandwidth between one zone or one VPC and another on AWS is only a gigabyte per second, right? And you're saying only, but if you have whatever, 20, 30, 40 machines, each of which are generating, a gigabyte or whatever, right? 100 megabytes a second or whatever, starts to add up, starts to block. So anyhow, by pushing that closer to the data, those aggregations, those simplifications, that is really big. Another really big thing we see is around prioritization. Let's say one server started flapping and sending nothing but 500 errors, but you had a FIFO log movement, first in, first out. What does that mean? Well, it means that everything before those 500 errors gets sent before the 500 errors. Well, that doesn't seem right. Really, I want to move those 500 errors straight to the top because I want someone to go look at it. So it could be minutes, maybe even hours before you finally get the data. Wouldn't it be nice to get it right away? Again, that's something that we can do right there. We can say, we have this built in called fan out, where we're like, look, if you're seeing whatever, if you see 500 errors in the next minute or in the last minute, I want you to send a special alert off this direction. But other than that, just send it normally. We can do that for you right there from the machine itself. So again, it's, these are all just a few. We have over 200 different connectors and things like that. These are just a few of the examples that we support. And what I'll say is that you can do, I have yet to meet a customer who can't do what they need to do with our platform. It's incredibly flexible, but it largely comes down to what we were saying earlier. What are your biggest problems? Are you not getting the data fast enough? Is your AI not performing correctly because it doesn't have the right context? Are you losing provenance and lineage because you're in a regulated industry and you need to record exactly where and when you collected that data? Is it cost savings, or do you want to go adopt the future and you want to run an AI agent next to your data to do, I don't know, anomaly detection or something like that? That's something we can help with as well.
I relate to your story of having something like a heartbeat missing and saying why, and then struggling so much to figure out that context. I think that's something that's still very common.
Isn't that wild?
Yeah, definitely putting it all together, understanding what was going on. Why did something go down?
Just gave a talk just a few weeks ago at KubeCon about this, because I think this is one of the missing observability layers in AI. And people are like, but I'm watching my model. I'm like, yeah, but you're missing something, right? Exactly to your point. Like, and you can go watch the talk, but it's basically like, what if when you trained your AI, you said, not only am I training you on this, but I'm going to attach the source to every data point. And so when I ask this black box model where this came from, it can try and tell me. Is it going to hallucinate? Who knows? At least it's in there. And at least you can say, hey, you came from this location. And as a result, now the black box model, it's not debugging it for you, but it's telling you where to start, which again is just absolute madness right now. Exactly to your point.
Could you tell me, I want to get into AI, but could you tell me from a user's perspective how this works? So do I create rules? Because it can do so many different observability patterns, and then I deploy it, and then it can alert me. Like, how does the user journey work here?
Yeah, so it's a great question. I will tell all our listeners, because you are a listener to Alexa's input, we're giving you a special deal. First 5 nodes free, cluster free. Go and enjoy. I joke. We really do give it away. Your first 5 nodes really are free. You can go mess around with it. We have a fun playground. We have a tutorial where you can figure it out. However, to answer your question, you deploy this agent to this location. In that location, it runs as a sub-process. It runs under whatever schema, whatever permission, whatever you'd like. That's where it runs. And then you join it to what's called an orchestrator, right? So much like Kubernetes, again, you can see our DNA really like leaking through here. It connects to that orchestrator, and then it says, okay, what jobs do you have for me? And then you're good to go. What you do is you write the job, and again, we're talking YAML. We're not even talking about it like a compiled language, right? It's just very straightforward. You write it in YAML. Here's your input. This is the file you read from, or this is the endpoint you read from, or whatever it is. Like I said, 200 connectors. Have yet to see someone that, needs something that we don't support. And then once it gets read in, you describe the pipeline that you're going to run against it. So here's the input. Here's the steps I want you to run. And we got everything. We have, like I said, all these like native tools for stream processing and so on and so forth. We have sub processes. We have full language constructs, loops and branches and things like that. And so you describe all the stuff you want to have in the middle. It's called processors. Every one of those is a processor. And then at the end, you say, okay, now I've reached this point in the stream and I'm ready to hand it off. And this is where I'd like the output to go. So it's really, really straightforward. It's exactly the way you would think about it. And you, as the author of the pipeline, don't need to think about anything else, right? You don't need to SSH in any place. You don't need to do anything. You just log into the orchestrator in the cloud and say, I want this pipeline to run against systems that have the following label on them. And off it goes. And then there you go. And so we really do try and make it as straightforward as you possibly can.
And does that require a lot of data and storage as well to hold all this context?
So we don't do it. That's another good thing that we do. We don't restore a single thing, not one. Not a single byte goes through us. It goes directly from your machines to whatever destination you have. We don't offer as an service or whatever. However, if you like, we have all these connectors built in. If you want to write it directly to S3, it's, again, like 3 lines of code. You just say, I want this machine over here and every machine that looks like it to write to this S3 bucket. You store the credentials there locally. We never see your credentials. And then it pushes wherever.
To give the listeners context, how I met you was because I was emceeing the AI Day and you gave an amazing presentation on how Expanso is helping to navigate understanding where your AI went wrong and its context. Like even though you get a 200, that the response was okay, maybe it hallucinated, it's helping it to understand where that error came from. I hope I'm getting that story right.
That is exactly the story. You listened beautifully.
You also had an amazing presentation, by the way. I mean, I think you told the story extremely well. Another question that I'm interested in is, how you go about telling this story.
It's funny because I'm really, I don't know, man. I feel like I'm really terrible at this. I'm not. I know I can tell a decent story, but I almost never have anything written down when I go on stage. I just really internalize what I want people to walk away from. And if nothing else, I follow some really, really, really basic patterns for how to give talk and how to pass things along. For example, this isn't new, but everything goes in threes. The human mind just kind of likes threes. So think about how to group things in threes, because if you do it 2 or you do it 4, people are going to be a little bit off. That doesn't mean it's not hard and fast, but it's really straightforward. I also love to do one of the best pieces of advice I ever heard around this was a talk that Joel Spolsky gave was what humans love about storytelling. And you can go read some of Joseph Campbell's stuff on this. Is basically you set up a situation where it is seemingly insurmountable how you're going to get past a thing. You really just try and drive it into the end user, that whatever they're listening to, I don't care if it's eating chocolate ice cream or going and solving cancer, right? You set it up that is so insurmountable that they'll never be able to get it. And they're like, wow, this is never going to happen. And then you promise them that there is a solution, and you give them the outline of the solution, and then you actually solve it, right? This is like the hero's journey and so on. And the more that you can set that up and so on and have that kind of structure, people are really going to appreciate that. And the final thing is there are all these rules about how much you should have on the slides and how much you should, whatever, the 10, 20, 30 rule and things like that. But I will say, the third big thing is really just, it is okay to be human. It's okay to tell that story and be approachable. I promise people are going to walk away far more with a vibe than almost any word or any sentence you come in with. And trying to marry yourself to some message that you want to come across is really, really hard, and almost always ends up in this you just reading because you're so nervous about getting those words right. I have yet to see it work well, which my content team hates, right? Because my content team is we're going to go record 20 videos with you. I'm like, okay, I got it. And they're like, here's the script. I'm like, okay, I got it. And then I get 2 words into the script, I'm off script. And they're like, what are you doing? But yeah, so it's okay to be human, really. And by the way, so that talk, for example, I knew I was going to demo it live. And please do link to it. Feel free, everyone, to go and badmouth me in the comments. But I knew I was going to demo it live. I was nervous because I was having trouble in the middle of it, like triggering the re-embedding. So it was a pretty advanced demo where in the middle of it, like it re-embeds the weights and things like that. And, it's a live wire act. I knew most of it was going to go well no matter what. And then at the end, it broke. Right at the end, I didn't re-embed fast enough and I was running out of time. So I was like, just trust me, it works. And you can come check out the code later and so on.
Yeah, I really do think all you needed was another minute or two and it would have worked.
Yeah,
It
for
was
sure.
pretty clear,
For sure. But it is one of those things where it's just like people, I remember reading this thing or listening to this thing about stage actors and people are like, oh, aren't you nervous if they get it wrong or whatever? And they're like, the audience is rooting for you. They really are. They don't want you to fail. And if you flub or whatever, just move on. And they're kind of like joking to each other. They almost get in your corner. They're like, oh man, that sucked. But they'll get it. They'll fix it out. They'll make it work. So yeah, there's nothing wrong with that. Nothing at all.
Yeah, I always say I think you can feel authenticity, and it's like there's no way that you would be demoing that if it didn't really work. Like you could feel that this is something that needs work, and we're all engineers in the building, and we know how things happen sometimes. And that's a good point that everyone's rooting for you. I was talking to Kelsey Hightower on here a few episodes ago, and
Wow.
he also said something that you mentioned is that I start with how I want people to feel when they leave or what I want them to take away from it. They'll understand the vibe way more than any word you said. And I think that's very true. Like both of your comments there are aligned. Also, anecdotally, I thought I was totally fine reading slide notes one time about something I definitely knew about, but I was reading it and I thought to myself, like, you probably couldn't really tell I was reading the notes. But I looked back on the YouTube video and you could definitely tell I was reading the notes. And there's something super engaging about, it doesn't need to be perfect, but someone who's like interacting with the crowd and like talking with them at them, not talking to their laptop on their notes. Totally. Even if it's more imperfect, it is so engaging. As the MC, I'll say I had to sit there all day. For the first time ever, I had to sit in one room all day at KubeCon and hear speaker after speaker after speaker. And I'll say, like, honestly, yours, and there was another one that stuck with me more than any of the others. And I'll say, along with like slides and everything you said, style, it was the storytelling that they were like talking with people too. So I do think that's something I've took that's very important. And I started to lean more, as I got busier, lean more on notes. And I realized that that's just not the best way to go usually.
I really, really appreciate that. And especially from someone who had to watch them all day. Like, it's funny. And don't get me wrong. Like, I know this is a good problem to have, but I got to be honest, like one of the challenges is I always really do want to get better. And I'm not asking you to like, beat up on me, although you're welcome to, but like, I really need to remember to ask for feedback from the audience more. And then like, look, even if you like want to say good things or whatever, maybe if you say good things that you want me to do more of, then I will, even if it's like I'm already doing. You're standing on stage, and you know how many people were in the audience. I don't know, 300 people or something like that. It was a decent sized room, but it wasn't like phenomenal. But at the same time, I really need to like make sure to get a little bit of feedback because I want to make it better too. I know I'm not perfect.
I relate to you on the feedback part, especially being an interviewer, for example. I myself have noticed things that I've liked more, not sure how little I talk. And I think with all these things speaking, it's such a skill. It's not easy. Like there's always room to improve. And I definitely feel you with the feedback part is often hard to get.
Yeah, totally agree. Totally agree.
It's definitely, especially in tech, I think it's when you're creating tech content, it's an especially hard skill because it's one that I think isn't studied as much about how to do great technical content, like marketing content, how to do brand content. I think that's something that has a lot more attention, but how to convey technical to a technical audience in a way that will be technical enough, but not too technical that they're gonna lose it tomorrow, and forget about it. Yeah.
Yeah, I totally agree. I mean, I think there's this, not to get too into philosophy, but I will be honest with you. I think that one of the biggest things is, tech, it sounds good, right? It sounds like you want to dive a million miles deep. But let's be honest, right? Showing code and stuff like that, which is great. And I show code plenty. But expecting people to read, font that's this big and really understand what's going on, have all the context, that's just not realistic. What people crave is authenticity. It's much easier to tell a story. I will still, I absolutely stole relentlessly from Kelsey Hightower. I was lucky enough to work with him at Google, and he and I have remained friends over the years. But I stole relentlessly because he's such a phenomenal presenter. He did a bunch of stuff that I now use all the time, like the 5-word slide with nothing on it, right? And so on, like where I'm kind of like mouthing the words of what the audience, or I'm joking or whatever, because it's just authentic. Hey, you know what? I know where you are. You just promised to save the world. What? Save the world? That's insane. What are you talking about? That kind of connection is really powerful. That authenticity is really powerful. And that is something where we, especially in tech, especially in this like highly polished Instagram world, I'm not bad mouthing Instagram or whatever. It just feels inauthentic. And the more that you can feel authentic, the better you'll be.
Yeah, I agree. And authenticity, there's a bit of vulnerability and a bit of personal style to it. Developing both of those or exposing both of those are very hard. Finding personal style is very hard. I think Kelsey Hightower did a great job with it on one of his famous talks about deploying Kubernetes with Fortran. I think we also discussed it on my talk a bit, but he started off talking about his mother, and he goes through, like, my mother gave me my name. I mean, it sounds so simple and it's his story, but I think for everyone finding that, especially when you're conveying something technical, is quite challenging. Like if you're Nike and you're like, I want people to be inspired to go achieve their dreams, they have these shoes that can achieve their dreams. But
yeah.
What can I do if you have my gateway?
You just have to keep up until you get to what the user is. Amazon is famous for this, right? It's what's your press release? What's your announcement? What does it mean to someone who is not implementing it, right? And you talk about gateway, and right, you're like, gateways, who freaking cares, right? But you're doing it for some reason. You're cutting the time it takes on your phone, or you're saving us a whole bunch of money, or you're whatever, right? There are things that matter, and it's just a matter of figuring it out. Or I don't know, even something that we do, right? Like the number one thing that people say when they use us is we reduce the amount of people that have to maintain pipelines. It's such a boring thing. But you go and talk to these teams, and it's like 70% of the team comes into the office, logs in, sees what broke last night because, some firmware version changed the order of, this column with that column, and now everything broke. They spend the rest of the day figuring it out, where it broke, what is this, what is that, so on and so forth. And what we do is we just give them a way to go detect that, right? Or go fix it in one command across 1,000 machines. I'm like, wow, that's great. The user in that case, the customer in that case is the internal dev team, but they know this pain enormously. So this is to say, I'm not trying to shill our product, tech people out there, figure out really who gives a shit about what you're building. If you delivered something in this world, in this subset of the feature you're working on right now, what really does it show up in? How does it show up? Yes, you now have attestable provenance across 17 different data types that is backed by hardware keys and so on. Okay, but what does that show up as? Because if you don't start with what it shows up as and why they actually care, they're never going to get there. And to be clear, if you can't name why they care or will care about it, guess what? You may not be working on the right thing. Or you got to go back to and figure out, what they will care about, what aspect of what you're building they will care about.
I totally agree. I think I took this from my English teacher. Knowing the so what for everything is so important.
Absolutely.
And I take that to every tech writing or anything I do. And I was joking a bit the gateway's not saving the world, but the so what for an AI gateway that can route based on capacity, save costs, understand token management for all of your tenants is actually super helpful and saves a lot of resources.
Yep.
And so there's definitely a for what there for everything.
I remember back in one of the earliest things in my career was, my manager, who had a ton of experience presenting to people, said, always ask almost exactly what you said, that what's in it for them? Why are they sitting here? Why are they listening? What's in it for them to spend their time doing that?
Yeah. And if you can't answer that, I think you have a good point. You should be questioning why you're working on it. Because there's nothing more frustrating to me personally than, number one, wasting my time, which would be working on something that doesn't matter.
Yeah. It doesn't mean don't work on it. Figure out what the story is.
Exactly. Storytelling is so important. We got on a little bit of tangent here. So can you tell me now about the story of the AI usage?
One of the biggest problems that people have today is I've got this great model. It trained on my machine. I got it hooked up to a camera. I was able to detect whatever boxes or people or whatever. What do I do with it now? And it turns out that even that is a weird problem. So what we do, we have a lot of people doing this where they're like, I have this security camera. I bought it from Costco. It's a 4K camera. It's like impossible to buy a less than 2K camera, right? They're like $60. So you get it. That's too big. It's too big for the model. It's too big for moving over the wire. Like, it's just bad. Doesn't mean it's not good quality video. It means, like, what do I want to do with it? Well, I want to detect to see if there's a human being in it. So I can, send an alert to my hostess so that she goes out front or whatever. Like, it's just silly things like that. If I have a few of those, I can't be sending it to the cloud. I'll blow out my budget. And by the way, my cable modem. So what we do is we have these little machines. We show people, we either sell it to them directly or show them what to buy. We don't care. We're not going to make any money off it. You go, you install it, you hook it up to your cameras, and then on it, we help you run a model. And that's a model you choose. We have some ones that we'll recommend, but a model you choose to first take that video in. Second, usually downsample it or scale it or whatever you like, and then run the whatever object detection or anomaly detection or whatever you like right there on this little $500 machine, right? And just by doing that, they're able to unlock all these great things. So now they can say, look, I'm not sending any raw video to the cloud. I am only sending the count of the number of humans in this picture or whatever, right? You can write whatever pipelines you like. But by doing this, you're putting this super rich thing in all these places. Now, could you go install this yourself? Of course, but that means you need to write your own video processor. You need to write your own model runner. You need to write your own extractor. Like, now that the model comes back, I need to grab the data and I need to like push it in something, and I need to write my own shipper of the resulting data to whatever PagerDuty or Slack or whatever you want to do. And then let's say you did all that. Now you want to update it. You want to update from model 1 to model 2. How do you do that, right? Now you got to go and think about all that again and make sure nothing breaks and so on and so forth. And I want to observe it, make sure that the model's still running, have open telemetry and other wrappers and monitor it and all that kind of stuff. Again, you have many open source repos that do this for you, and you can go grab one and run it right now. Again, 5 nodes free, go enjoy, do it yourself. Or if you want to do it at scale, come talk to me and we're happy to help. But the whole point of it is we are not choosing your model. We're not choosing your pipeline. We're not doing anything complicated like that. We're just making it really, really easy for you to do that. Or whatever, steal the templates that we have out there, again, of which there are hundreds, for you to go do it yourself.
I think that's a story of many things. You could do it yourself, but do you have the time, resources, and want to manage it?
Yep, totally agree.
You use an example of a video anomaly detection, but in the demo that you were running in KubeCon, it was also just trying to understand where a language model went wrong. So you also have support for that too.
Oh yeah. So we don't care what model it is, right? And so in that model, that was barely a ML model, right? It was in Python. It was like raw LLM. I had personally written in Python, like you saw on stage. I did do embedding and things like that, but it still was just generic. And what I say over and over again is we take the data in, and we really don't care what the data type is. It could be video, it could be text, it could be a stream, it could be audio. We have someone using us for like doing audio ingestion, and then it goes to your pipeline. And in that demo that you saw there, we were pulling, those were 3 different text files that in this case, make no mistake, it wasn't a mocked-up demo. It really was code, but like, come on, it was just stored files on disk. We had 3 different pipelines, one that read from each file that was being generated and stuck it into the stream. And then during the demo, I said, okay, well, this stream is how it looks to start, but I'm going to swap it to a better stream that adds some metadata and some logic and some provenance, so that when I do this re-embedding later, it will be able to pick that information up and then tell me where the file is that it came from. And so that's what we're able to do. So yeah, really, Anything that you're using today is creating data, guaranteed. Audio, video, text, phone, GPS, blah, blah, blah. These are all data streams. We support all of them. And what we do is just help you process them closer to where your data is. And again, I want to re-stress whatever your backend is. Data warehouse, Databricks, Snowflake, Redshift, a Datadog, Splunk, whatever. Great. Keep using them. Promise. We're not going to rip and replace a single thing. You just put us in between where you're collecting and where you're landing. And along the way, you get to make everything downstream much better.
Yeah, because you have these metrics like time to first token, 100, 400 response code. And you also have these judges that are trying to judge the accuracy or those different metrics. But what your tool does specifically would tell you exactly where it went wrong, which
Exactly.
if I'm understanding correctly, all these tools don't do, but it works well alongside all of them.
That's exactly right. And again, I want to be clear because I don't want to overstate. What we do is we allow you to query the result, of your LLM. And the LLM doesn't say what went wrong specifically, but it does say where this came from. Now, you could do other things downstream, right? But my thesis is just by starting with that, where you said, I'm pulling from this file that was generated at this time by this source, you're already way ahead of where you are. I mean, just like you were saying earlier on this call. Today, I don't know, I spent half my time figuring out what machine was simply spitting out this bad data before I even get to go and debug. Imagine you could jump to the middle. Again, anyone who promises to be able to jump to the end, you got to question them a little bit, right? But if you can say, I'm going to help you at least jump to the middle, wow, you are off to a much better place.
I also like the repeatability and all these different use cases you're able to use from the same pattern. I feel like that's pretty special.
Absolutely. Absolutely. That's one thing that you're talking to a bunch of, I wish I could claim myself in the same way, but you're talking to, my CTO and my entire team is such a bunch of old school engineers that they are so deep in reproducibility and declarative rollout and things like that. You're going to use it and, in 3 weeks, it's going to run great. And then something will break and you'll be like, what broke? Like, that's when you're really going to be thanking them. Sure, on day 1, you're going to be thanking them because it's easy to get going. But on day, 24, when something broke that you didn't expect to break and you're able to dive in and fix it and immediately diagnose what's going on, that's where you're really going to thank them. And I know this because, as I build demos and stuff, I'm like, wow, that's really awesome. There's that little feature that lets me, test my data before I roll it out. Isn't that cool? So on and so forth.
Exactly. And where are you at in this startup timeline? Are you in a certain series and how many employees do you have?
We are Series A. We are, knock wood, profitable this quarter. We're not looking to raise, but we're always looking for more and better opportunity to work with big customers and things like that. And we do a lot of partnership stuff. So for us, it is, we know that despite the pedigree of my team, they're not going to trust us like they would AWS or Microsoft or something. Of course not, right? That's a ridiculous amount of expertise and history and things like that. So we really do think that the strongest motion here is through partners. The number of clouds I go and talk to where they're like, oh yeah, we have this customer that can't wait to get on cloud, but they don't know how, or they're blocked by so on and so forth. How are we going to get there? And I'm like, look, we can help, right? You just put us near those things and it helps consume your cloud service more, better, faster, because they can now roll these things out and get it going.
That sounds like a great strategy. So I have a few rapid fire questions. First is, what are some ways you use AI in your daily life?
I mean, I wouldn't even know how to operate it without AI at this point. Certainly, of course, I record everything. And I don't do anything where it's audio recording. I do text only because, I want people to have privacy. And if it's text, then it doesn't matter. Anyone can write anything in text. So that kind of forgeability makes it clear that no one's a threat. I love it for summarization and really giving me the bullet of what to do. So I'll hand it a lot of transcripts and say hey, what did I miss here? Or is there any action item that I might have not written down that I need to go do? And I'm not, I was using some of these services. I've been kind of disappointed with how slowly They've been advancing, and there's some local only stuff, but they have terrible APIs and stuff. So I'm really looking for something better to do recording and things like that. I use it a lot to do, action item tracking, what I forget to do. Oh, we talked about this during this meeting. Have I followed up on it properly? Watches my email, just read only to make sure like it sees that like an email went out and so on. A lot of travel planning too. I travel a lot and making sure that, it's tracking me to a place and, this person are in town, make sure to send them a note or, hey, my last meeting is here. Is there a good restaurant nearby that I should go try? I don't know, man. I use it all over the place.
I love hearing how people are using it in their daily life. And I think that it's so great for meetings because you don't need to write things down. You can just have the meeting face to face, be fully in, and then later find out what your action items need to be or what you need to remember, what you missed. And I think that's actually such an amazing tool to have.
Yeah. I mean, it's always been one of my weakest areas. I won't say I'm neurodivergent or whatever, but like, I'm just so bad, remembering what to follow up on. And yep, absolutely. Brutal.
What is the most overrated part of the AI stack right now?
Overrated. I mean, I don't know. I think it's probably pretty trite to say these harnesses, OpenClaw and Hermes and whatever. I was OpenClaw originally. I've now added Hermes. I don't think that either of them are overrated, right? But I do think that they require a lot of fine tuning. And I think people want to drop them in and have them work. And there's just a lot of work involved there in order to get it right. And that's not their fault. It's because these are hard problems. I'll tell you something I think is overrated is the drop this in and clone this website or get me a website up and running, a single page application up and running in 20 seconds. Come on, man. Like, yes, it's pretty. Yes, it's a first version. And I do it all the time, but it's not even a prototype, man. It's barely that. Just calm down. I will also say, actually, I am a former Microsoftie. I love my Microsoft brethren. I'm a former Googler, and I love my Googler brethren. Both of you should be ashamed of yourself about the level to which AI is integrated with your Office stacks. It is pathetic. Like, it is so bad. And I'm sure by the time this comes out, it'll be better. And I'm sure a month from now, when someone's listening to it, they're like, oh, what are you talking about? I'm telling you, like, it is so hard to create a even moderately good slide deck or moderately good Word document. And I will never let it near a spreadsheet. It's insane. And these are well-defined formats. Well-defined.
Not a spreadsheet. For some reason, it cannot do that.
Oh my God. Which is crazy. They are so well defined. They're so scoped. And you're like, okay, hey, you know what? In my slide deck, everything that looks like a header should be whatever, header 1. Try and ask that question and have it actually do it. If you're lucky, it'll take 5 minutes, and most of the time it'll just fail. It's crazy.
I mean, you're right. Even in Gemini Docs, I just like copy and paste and be like, reformat this, and it will sometimes just not
absolutely
do it.
You would just, I cannot figure it out. I cannot figure it out. So, I mean, I know these people. I don't know what you're doing. Maybe they need a fork, right? Maybe they're like, they need a fork of their product so they can operate quickly. Because I'm sure all of them are like, wow, we'd love to release it, but you don't understand. We have, a billion people using this file format. If we do something hinky, like something will go wrong. You know what? I bet you could figure out a way, man. Create a new file format, create a new something, whatever. This is insane.
Yeah, I will say that I have been quite surprised by that, especially with how advanced other tools are, or how advanced the chatbot itself is, how easily it can do those things. But when it's integrated with the products, there's something about that it seems to not be able to handle as well. I totally agree with you there. And what do you think is the most underrated tool or concept?
Underrated tool or concept. I don't think enough people are using AI to aggressively question your assumptions or question each other, right? So one thing I love doing is I found a skill called adversarial review. And all it does is I'll create a spec. I'll just talk to something for 10 minutes and say, okay, here's a new feature. Here's what I'm thinking about, so on and so forth. Create I use a open source library called OpenSpec out of this document. And so it gives it a structured thing. And then I say, do adversarial review. And Claude talks to Codex and argues between each other for 3 rounds saying, make it better. And then it comes back and it's almost always very good and almost immediately implementable. Like I then take that and hand it to something, whatever, Claude or Codex or take your pick, and it goes from there.
This is great. Like I didn't know about this. This is such a great
Yeah.
idea. I want to do this. Will it be good for feedback too? Like I wonder if it can analyze a talk sometimes.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Like, so really have it question you. And, not in this like, oh, what part of my life is missing? Like say, hey, I'm looking at doing this thing, go create a spec around it, and then say, okay, now you're a very skeptical person looking at this thing. Tell me what's wrong with it. Make it stronger. Make me stronger. If this is completely wrong, tell me a new direction. And use it in that way. Don't just take it and run with it. But, AI for me is so exceptional at the starter. So for example, I do 2 blog posts a week, and my path is I dictate, I come up with an idea, whatever it is, and I just dictate into, Whisper. There you go. Whisper Flow for whatever, 5 minutes. Do this, and I think there's an idea there, and I think there's something around this, and so on. And then I tell AI, go create an outline out of this and make it a strong outline. Here's my voice. Here's my this. Oh, that's another thing I love doing. Go ask it to create your personal voice, and it will walk you through this exercise where you record like 20, 30 recordings of yourself answering questions. And it's really quite good at building a personal voice archive.
This is so cool. What do you use for this? What tool do you use for this?
I just used Claude. I had Claude. I said, I want to create a personal voice. How do I do that? They said, okay, got it. What we're going to do is I'm going to give you 20 questions. I want you to record them all using the voice app on your phone, one at a time, answer each question, stop it, and move on. Drop them all in. I will analyze them, and then off you go. And that's what I did.
Wow.
And so it went and did that. So I have it. I have it use my personal voice to create this outline for my blog post. Then I write it.
I think that's an important part to actually write it.
Oh yeah. Otherwise, but I mean, so I check a lot of times whether or not I get flagged, and I do get flagged a lot from the detector. And the reason is because immediately after I finish writing it, which is very coarse, I hand it to Claude and I say, okay, Claude, go do a full grammar pass, tighten this up and so on.
Yeah.
Cut it down by 20%. I always tell it to cut it down by 20%, just because everyone could use an editor. And then it does. And by that point, I'm not really reading anymore, right? I'm scanning, I'm making sure it doesn't sound too crazy, but it's definitely like picked up some like AI, this isn't a blah, it's a blah, right? Or, whatever. They just have these standard phrases, and it gets that. And sometimes I catch them. A lot of times I don't. I wrote it really coarsely. It did the editing. It took my raw words and it converted it. And I am 100% sure that as it's doing that conversion, it's making it more AI sounding. I want my ideas to get out there. I wouldn't mind publishing the raw ones, but honestly, I'm fine with the like AI editing. And
yeah. And you're still the driver. You're not just saying,
for sure.
Create.
Yeah. I'm not saying go look at keywords and come up with something. It's always my idea. And I really do always start with that, whatever 5-minute long dictation.
And where are you posting it, and what are you using to... You say you get flagged by some system. What is the system?
Well, I do it manually. I use a tool called Pangram. It's pretty good. And I'm just kind of fascinated to use it and check myself. I post it to a website called distributedthoughts.org and then to LinkedIn and Blue Sky.
What is one thing you think every infra engineer should understand about AI?
AI is just an app, ma'am. AI is just an app. That is the number one thing. If you're an infra engineer, everything you know about using AI today is the same as it was using a microservice 5 years ago, is the same as using a virtual machine image 5 years before that, same as using Chef or Puppet 5 years before that, whatever, right? Like, it's just an app. You roll it out, you got to monitor it, you got to give it permissions, you got to manage credential rolling, you got to this, you got to that. It's the same, right? Inside it, that microservice is doing crazy stuff. But if you're an infra engineer, just make sure it runs well and that you can monitor it, and you're going to be off to the races.
It's a good point. There are a lot of patterns that are pretty consistent throughout any evolution of new technology, for sure. What is one prediction about the future of AI that you feel pretty confident in?
Today's as dumb as it's ever going to be. What do I think is pretty confident in? I feel pretty confident that I think that the X risk, the risk of it, like, actually turning into, evil, world-changing horribleness is less than 1%. I really do. It doesn't mean we shouldn't be extremely cautious. I really, really, really respect the people out there working on safety because they're thinking about this and they're going to make sure that 1% is 0.1% or 1/100%, right? So I'm not saying don't invest in that, but I do think that the real world is complicated. And the adoption the capabilities will be exceptional and continue to be exponentially exceptional every single day, week, month. However, adapting that exceptional things to the real world will be far slower than anyone expects. We're doing a business deal with a rental car company, right? And they would love to use AI, but they're like, whatever, they got Android phones and they're like, I don't know, we're just trying to track our drivers, man. Help us, make sure that we're doing that. And, I think there will be ups and downs labor market wise. I am very, very nervous about this. I really wish a lot of our leaders took a much more humanitarian is probably the wrong term, but much more like sympathetic view towards this. And not just sympathetic, not saying, well, we got to be thoughtful about it, actually working on it, right? I'm not going to go to say they need to go like personally donate to UBI or something, but like actually working on it, actually figuring out the policies. I saw somebody talk about data centers and they were saying these people building a data center should make it valuable. Yes, absolutely. If you put up a data center today and you live within 5 miles, they should say, we're going to pay your electricity bill for free, just for free. Like that's it. You pay no electricity. If you have a data center and you're within 5 miles for free, think of how much that would change things. And that's so de minimis. A data center is supposedly about $50 billion. Like, this is de minimis cost to you. Like, just pay it, man, and make people happy. Like, bridge from where we are in tech. We have so much. We've been so lucky to be at the exact center of the place where stuff is happening. Like, share the wealth a little bit. It's not the end of the world. I get it. You're worth $870 billion today. Imagine you were only worth 860. Like, would that really be that bad? Just share the wealth, man, and actively share it. Maybe you don't actually go out there and do it. Maybe you find some people who are going to do it. It will help everyone. So, it's a long way of saying, I don't know about jobs, but I really want us to be like very conscious of it.
Are you not worried about defense tech at all?
Again, I think this is real world stuff, right? Ukraine, for example, right? Like is out there with $200 drones, shotgunning, whatever, $1 million, whatever, super drones or whatever with a shotgun and a $200. And none of that is AI. That's like you with a remote control. Like the thought that like AI is somehow going to be like whatever, shooting lasers from space. I don't know, man. It doesn't feel like it to me. So I think that AI, the thing that will be the most negative about AI will be the way that it interleaves into our lives in a really subtle and pernicious way. And you can see this, right? Like some of the major platforms, their algorithm, for example, and this has been the case for, 15, 20 years at this point, just much worse, is designed for engagement. And so as a result, you log on and you see someone you absolutely hate presented before you with like no sense whatsoever. Now, I'm not saying you need to be like Shelter, right? No trigger warnings or anything like that. I'm not saying those are bad. I'm just saying like, that's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about this is designed to find the thing that will piss you off the most, not make your world better, expand your brain, piss you off to the point that you click on their thing and say, I have to respond to you. Otherwise, I'm just going to go nuts. That's all it's doing. That is AI. And it is getting better and better and better at figuring that out, figuring out exactly what they need in order to get you to engage. That is where it's very, very pernicious. Lasers from space, not worried. Just not worried. Like whatever they could do, they're already able to do. And we'll figure that out.
I do agree. Like replacing your thinking or using it to brain rot, appeal to your most base attention span engagement is definitely not great for our brains. I think there's been a lot of studies already on it. Don't quote me. But it just from a user experience when there's been times when I've been on Reels way too long and I'm like, what just happened?
Absolutely.
Why did that just happen? And I don't like it add nothing to my life. I think that this is a real problem that is really not great for us. I agree.
It's really funny. On my TikTok album, all my friends are like, oh, you're on TikTok. I love it, man. I have it crafted to a T. It's like nothing but math and science and restaurants and wine. Like, I love it. It's great. And it keeps me up at night, but it's what I would have watched anyway. Like, I just saw like an entire list of nonfiction books that I, couldn't wait to use. By the way, there's another thing. TikTok, if you're listening, please Like, what am I doing wrong? Your app is unusable in so many ways. I see all this great content. I don't know what to do with it. I want to take all these 5 books that I saw on somebody's TikTok and add them to my Goodreads. Why is it that hard? Why can't you do that?
You're right. I like integrations, even with Instagram, like if it's cooking, there's no way to like put that into a cookbook easy or anything. I mean, I think integrations like these are always the frustration where like I have to save it to a folder and then later, I'm not really going to look back at that later. And then that makes it less useful to me. But I completely 100% agree with that. And TikTok has a totally different algorithm, but I think I saw a slide with some stats about retention time, and TikTok by far has the highest retention time because their algorithm is so good.
I believe it, man. I do. And so, yeah, without question, their content creation is the best. Their algorithm is great. I don't see whatever celebrities or like how to paint, ceramics or whatever. Not that those aren't fine. Go enjoy. Just not for me. So they are really good. I'm just saying, like, I need you to be better.
So it's like, can you make this integration, please?
I would do it myself. I would vibe code it myself. But their API, again, I love you, TikTok. Your API is garbage.
Okay, I love that you looked into it. Yeah, so maybe a better API.
Got off the rails there.
I know. Well, that's all the questions I had for you. Do you have any last words or advice that you would like to leave our listeners with?
My website says what I believe, right? Technology is not neutral. I love technology. I've been in it forever. What you're building will be used for good, will be used for evil, like it will. And what you're building, you need to be conscious of. And as you think about what you are doing, think about how it's going to be used and think about how you use your force for good. And even if it doesn't mean you're not allowed to use this on a whatever, cancer sprayer, I have no idea. But the extent to which you can advocate on behalf of your technology for use in good ways goes a long way. So, it requires a remarkably small amount of people with a remarkably high passion in order to change the world for the better. And you can do it too.
That's great. So if you have a Claude bot, make sure it doesn't go and write a defamation blog post about the maintainers of the open source project that are gatekeeping open source.
Oh, well. And again, you know what? The funniest part about that is, why it did it? Because it had seen that being done. Right? All these things, they learn from something that already happened.
How do humans operate on the internet and get what they need to get done? Defamation.
Yeah.
It's
true. It's true.
Thank you so much for listening to Alexa's Input AI. And if you want to follow along with my new episodes, writing, content, everything I'm building, you can find me at alexagriffith.com, on Substack, on YouTube, or wherever you listen to podcasts. If you enjoyed this conversation, it would mean a lot if you subscribed, shared this episode with a friend, left a quick rating or a comment to help more people to discover the show and keep these conversations going. Again, I'm really grateful you're here. This podcast started as a side project for me a few years ago, and every listener who reaches out or keeps coming back reminds me exactly why I love doing this and I love putting so much time into it. I hope this episode gave you something to think about, something to talk about. So always stay curious, stay grounded, and I hope to see you next time. Thank you for your support.